Hi, everyone. This is Hannah again. This video will do a few things. One, I want to do a refresher share of my GoFundMe campaign, which, just to remind everyone, is a fundraiser for an Egyptology program abroad next year. So the first thing that I'm going to do is share my screen so that you can get a refresher of what that page looks like. So this is my GoFundMe campaign page. So the campaign is Explorations in Egyptology. The link will be in this video's description. So we have raised over $1,000. Yay! So I'm really hoping to keep that momentum going, and just remember, every little bit helps. So this program is at the University College of London. It is a master's program in Egyptology for 2022. So this is, again, the campaign title, Explorations in Egyptology. This is the main image that you will see when you get to the campaign page. And then I've put in my story here more about the program, including program links and more images. So I was able to travel to Egypt in as an undergraduate. So that is what these images are from my trip at that point. And then I have some updates here as well. So now I'm going to pivot away from that, and I am going to share my main Facebook page with everyone who is watching this video. So I run a tutoring business in history and archaeology. Partly this is this is because I really do like to spread my knowledge, but it's also a way for me to earn money for the Egyptology program abroad for next year. So if you don't want to donate to the GoFundMe, if you're interested in aspects of Egyptology or the history of the ancient world, we can do lessons and private sessions for that knowledge as well. So I charge, my starting rate is $20 per hour. And so that is another way that you can contribute as well. And then you are getting something that hopefully will stay with you for a lifetime on your end as well. Because of COVID, most of my tutoring is done online. So now I'm going to share my screen so everyone can see that main Facebook page. So this is the title of the Facebook page, Tutoring. I do have a class that I am running in January and February through Facebook about women in ancient Egypt. So this class is free, and if you want to get a little taste of my knowledge base and the kinds of topics that I know a lot about, this is a good way to do that as well. So if you click on the classes tab here, that will show up. So it's 5 class sessions, and the first one is on January 5th. This page also has a multitude of posts and different Egyptology sources that I've found as well. So if you scroll down here, you will see those videos come up as well. And then on this more detailed page, so on the left hand side, you will see the link to my main website, which is here. So hopefully, even if you don't have a particular topic that you want to find out about, this page is just a cool source for you to find out more things about the ancient world, even if you don't want to do that in a formal or more formal learning type setting. So this is, again, my main Facebook page. So you can message me through this page and respond to the videos and things that I put up as well. And just like the GoFundMe, the link for this Facebook page is in the description for the video as well. So the last part of this video that I wanted to do is I wanted to go over more hieroglyphic examples from objects. So these come from the step-by-step hieroglyphics website, and they come from the Let's Read tab. So I'm going to share my screen again, and we will get started on those. So I'm just waiting for it to fully load. So this is, again, a document that I started myself, and one of the last videos, we got about halfway through this document, and then I had to stop. So this is where we're picking back up. So the first object that we are going to start with, again, from the step-by-step website, and I will put that main link and then the Let's Read tab in particular in the description for this video as well. So the first object that we are going to start with is a plate with the name of King Me. This is. So just a little reminder of the format of the objects that you see in this Let's Read tab is it has what the object is, and then it has the hieroglyphic inscription, and then it has that translated in English here. So because of the type of computer that I have, I was able to take a screenshot of the image, so of the object. So this is the actual object, and then do web capture to break up the hieroglyphics and do the markups in red. So these markups in red are my own work. They're not what you'll see if you go to the main site. So we're going to go back up a little bit here. So the first two words that we see is this N underlined TR, so netter, and then this NFR. So these first two words mean the good God, and that the is implied. So the N underlined TR, that is good, or the N underlined TR, that is God, and then that NFR is good or perfect. So this is where we get that the good God part of the phrase. And then what that corresponds to in the hieroglyphics is this, or these two images here. So this is that NTR, or N underlined TR, so God, and then this is that hieroglyphic sign that is good or perfect. So both of these hieroglyphic images, those are both trilaterals. So they're hieroglyphic images that stand for 3 sounds. So that's why each of those 2 words is those 3 hieroglyphic letters. And then we have the next phrase, Lord of the 2 lands, and that corresponds to this NB T, and then what looks like the number 3, WY. And those two words together mean Lord of the Two Lands. So that NB is a bilateral, so it's a hieroglyphic that stands for two sounds, and it means Lord. So NB Lord, and then we have an implied of, and then that T, what looks like a 3WY, that is a phrase that means two lands. So together, this NBT, what looks like a 3WY, is this phrase Lord with the implied of the two lands. And then if we look at the actual object, these are the two hieroglyphs that phrase corresponds to. So this image here, this is the hieroglyphic, that NB, that means Lord. And then we have these two what look like straight lines here. And this is the Tau way. So this is the T, which what looks like the number 3, WY. And this is the two lands part. So now we're going to go back up. And then the next part of the phrase is NBJR dash H, which I call it elliptical H, but it's the H with basically this under it. So this, and then T. And this or that phrase equals, again, that NB Lord. And then we have this JR dash elliptical HT. That is equals occult practices. So the hieroglyphics that corresponds to and the actual object are these two here. So Lord, and implied of here, the occult practices. And then we have these last two hieroglyphics here on this first register, and what looks like a sedge or a plant-like thing with a B. And the part of the inscription that corresponds to is this Nesway biddy here. So NSW BITY, and that is a phrase that translates to King of Upper and Lower Egypt. Because these hieroglyphics, so the sedge and the bee, those are emblems of Lower and Upper Egypt respectively. So by the New Kingdom, you have this thing called the fivefold royal titulary, and basically one of the standard royal nomenclature by that time for pretty much every monarch was King of Upper and Lower Egypt. So that's our first register here. So we're done with this first register. And then we move on to the second register here. So that's why this register is labeled A, because it's the first one that you read. And then this next one is B. And then you read this last one over here, which is why I put it as C. So we go back up to the hieroglyphics. And then the next phrase that we have looks like a name. So this Gen, Neb, Eb, Re. And so that corresponds to this, again, elliptical H, N, M, dash, J, B, dash, R, and then what looks like a C that's, just sort of hanging up in the air. And in this case, those three chunks together make up the name Gen, Neb, Ib, Re. And so now we go back down to the hieroglyphics, and that is what this is. So we have our first royal name. You can tell it's a royal name because it's in a cartouche here. And so then we go up to, again, the hieroglyphics, and we next see these hieroglyphics chunks here. So again, this S, and then, or again, what looks like our number 3, and then that R with the ion again. And so together, those correspond to this phrase, son of Re. So that S with what looks like a 3, that is the hieroglyphic, or that translates the hieroglyphic word of sun, not the sun in the sky, but the biological sun. And then there's an implied of in the middle here, and then this R, which with what looks like a C that's just sort of hanging up in the air, that is Re or Ra. So in this case, it's the sun god Re. And so if we look at the hieroglyphic object, that son of Re phrase, so that Sa Ra corresponds to these two images here. So we have what looks like a duck. This is the sun, and then a circle here, and that is the Ra. And then it looks like we have another royal name because again, it's in a cartouche. So we go back up to the hieroglyphic inscription, and the next chunk of things that we see is this. So starting with what looks like an I to sorry, I'm just also to this MS here. And that matches this Amhos, the second in parentheses here. So that matches this royal cartouche here. And then the next one that we have is this underlined D, H, W, T, Y. So that matches Toth, which is the hieroglyphic, or matches this hieroglyphic here. And then we go back up to the inscription, and then the next words that we see is this N underlined TR, and that again is what we saw in the beginning of the inscription, and that means God. So it's basically, it corresponds this N underlined TR with again this C that's sort of hanging up in the air with what looks like our number 3. That corresponds to this phrase here, the great God. So that NTR is the God part, and then this what looks like a C that's just sort of hanging up in the air, which is ion. That's the hieroglyphic transcription, is or can be translated as great. So this NTR ion is the great God, and the hieroglyphics that matches are the ones down here. So again, we see what looks like a flag. So that is that N underlined TR. So that's the God part. And this hieroglyphic, which in this case is a bilateral. So it's a hieroglyphic that represents 2 sounds, is that great part. And now we're going to go back up to the inscription, and the last hieroglyphic chunk that we have is this NB S, what looks, and then what looks like a small V at the top. So again, that particular S is transcripted as shoe. So shoe T-Y-T. And that matches this last phrase, which is Lord of Shate. So again, I'm not fully figured out on how to pronounce everything in hieroglyphic. So I think I probably got that last word a little bit off in terms of its pronunciation. So we have this NB Lord, and then we have this last word, which is this hieroglyphic word here, which matches this word here. And so now we go back down to the actual object, and these hieroglyphics are what we have left. So again, we have this hieroglyphic here, which is that NB Lord. So we saw it in this first register as well. And then we have these last two images, and these images all together make up that last word of shoe. Go back so you can see it. Shoe T-Y-T. So this is a good object to tell you a little bit more about hieroglyphics and how they generally work as well. So if you look at this object, the first thing that you'll notice is that it's in these very clear registers. And this is something that I've talked about in other videos as well, is that if you look at the hieroglyphic text on objects as well as other mediums, you'll notice that the Egyptians liked to put things down in registers. If you also look at the animals that are on this object, so the saw, so what looks like a duck here, so that hieroglyph that means biological son, and then this other fowl animal, and fowl I meant F-O-W-L, not the foul like bad. You'll see that they're both facing this way, and that is a vital clue, because hieroglyphics can be read either left to right or right to left, and your clue to figure out which one you follow is to find any animals or people in the hieroglyphic inscription, and whichever way they're facing, that is the way that you start to read. So in this case, you have both these duck looking things that are facing this way, so to the left, and so that tells you, okay, you start to read with this register over here, and then B, C. They both animals were facing this way, so to the right, you would start to read from right to left. So here, this would be register A, and then dot, dot. So now we're going to go through a few other objects. So this is a plaque of another royal king, and this has his name, and it has some elements of the royal nomenclature as well. So this again is the hieroglyphic inscription here, and then this is the English translation. So first we're going to look at the object and see if we can spot any animals, people. Right away you see this snake that jumps out, and the snake is facing to the right. So that tells you, okay, you start you start reading on the right and then end up here last. So that's how I've numbered this. So the first two words that we see are again that N underlined TR and that NFR. So we see that phrase, the good God, pop up again. So that this is the matchup for those two hieroglyphics. So again, we have what looks like a flag. It's not quite as clear as we saw in the other object, but that is the N underlined TR. So that is the God part of the good God. And then we have this hieroglyphic here, and that is the NFR or the good. So now we have this H and what looks like two ions. So again, the C that's just sort of, or what looks like our C that's just kind of hanging up in the air, JB, and then that ray. So in this case, those three hieroglyphic chunks, so from here to here, make up that royal name in the cartouche, which is this Hab-I ray. So this here. And then we have these last two hieroglyphic words, which is that again, ion, N, elliptical H, which can be translated as life or live. And then we have this underlined DT. So together, those two hieroglyphic words make up that phrase eternal life. So this Ankh, which is it is a trilateral hieroglyphic. So it's a hieroglyphic that represents three sounds, is life. And then that underlined DT is that eternal part. And that underlined D is a snake. And then we see this, what looks like a sort of half bread loaf, and that is T. So you can tell that this is the underlined T snake or underlined D snake because it doesn't have horns that are sticking out of the top of its head. If it did, that would tell you that this is F, which is the unilateral sign for horned serpent, which is the which is our letter F. But because it doesn't have those horns, you can tell this is just the regular snake, which is that underlined D. So now we're moving down to the next object, and this is another royal object, and it is a pierced faience plaque. And again, you can see that the idea of registers is somewhat loosely followed here. So you find the animals or people. So in this case, it's another duck looking thing, and it's facing to the right. So that tells you, okay, you start reading the inscription here. So you go from right to left. So the actual hieroglyphic inscription is this S, again, what looks like our number 3, and then T. So that word is daughter. And then that NSWT, that is king. So those first two words give you your first part of this phrase, which is king's daughter. And so then you go to the object. This is the hieroglyphic trilateral lateral, that is this NSW, so kings. And then this is the daughter part. So this, what looks like a duck or some sort of duck type thing, is a bilateral hieroglyph. And this is that S and what looks like a 3. And then we have the unilateral, that is the half bread loaf, that is T. So together, these two hieroglyphs make up that word daughter. So king's daughter, and then this last hieroglyphic image is the name. So MR, and T is in parentheses because it's not fully on the object, but it's this hieroglyphic here. So this is a case of a hieroglyphic that is another bilateral because it's meaning MR. So all together, unimplied the here, king's daughter, merit. This is a non-royal object, and it is a cone of Nebseni. So he was a priest, and I think this was found in his tomb or somewhere close by, but it has his titles on it. So again, because it's not a royal object, the registers and the hieroglyphics are not as clear or as crisp as we saw in the earlier objects, but the idea of registers is still there. So if you look at this object, it doesn't have right off the bat any helpful animals or people to tell you which way to read it. So you go to the default way to read hieroglyphics, which if there's not those clues, it is from left to right. So this left part here is the first register, and then this second part here is the second register. So if you look at the actual inscription here, you have this W, again, what looks like that C in the air, so that IN and B. And that word is translated as Wab priest. So it is a title. The hieroglyphics that it matches, or hieroglyphic that it matches, is here. So Wab priest, and then you have this next NPR. So that N is, in this case, meaning of. So N can either be a word or the word meaning of, or it can be just one of the unilateral hieroglyphics that functions as letters in, or the letter N in a larger word. Either way, that N is this hieroglyphic image here, which is a unilateral that looks like a series of wavy lines, because it means, or Egyptologists think that it originally meant water. So Wab priest of, and then this PR is a trilateral that means house. And it's this hieroglyphic here. So Wab priest of, and implied the house. And then there's an implied of here. So this house of, this of is implied. And then the next set of words that we have is this dotted H M dot F. And this matches this this chunk here, His Majesty. So in this case, we have the dotted HM is the majesty part, and then that F is the pronoun his. So it matches this here. So this is the majesty part, and then this is the F part here. So that F is the horned serpent. So it's not super clear, but if you look really closely, you can just kind of see those horns that are peeking out. And that is the very subtle clue that tells you this is F horned serpent, not underlined D snake. And so that we're done with that first register. So now we're moving on to this second register here. And so this is our last chunk. So NB-SNY. So in this case, those hieroglyphic chunks together make up this guy's name, make up the name of Neb-Sen-Ni. So that NB that we saw in the earlier royal objects, that meant Lord. In this case, it's just a bilateral that's part of a name. And so now we go to the actual object, and that is what this is here. So we have that NB, so the first part of his name, and then that S, N, and then this is Y. So what looks like kind of a flag, but more of maybe a branch, if you just see one of them, it's J. If you see two of these images together, it's the hieroglyphic Y. So now we're just going down further. This is a lid of, or a coffin lid. So this is another non-royal object. And so it's the lid of Mer-Nefer. So it's a little bit harder to read just because the hieroglyphics are a little bit smaller. So I'm going to go through it, but I realized that, you know, this particular object is not as ideal for screen share as some of the earlier objects were. So the first chunk that we have in hieroglyphics is these two words here. So underlined D, regular D, and then MDW. So those two together equals the phrase words spoken. This is also an object that I'm not as certain of my translations as I was for the earlier ones, partly because the hieroglyphs are smaller and there's just more and they're more squished in. So this is an object that there's a good possibility that some of the ways that I chunked it up are not fully correct. So I think that, or I'm almost 100% sure that this first hieroglyphic here is that underlined D and T, because again, that snake, you know, it's a regular snake, which is the underlined D and not the horned serpent, because there's no horns that are sticking up, which would mean it was F. So I'm almost 100% certain that this first hieroglyphic is that underlined D and regular D, which is words. And then I think this is MDW, which is spoken, but that's one that I'm not fully sure about. And then we have that JN, which is by, and then that WSIR, which is Osiris. So those are two examples where I'm not as sure where they fall in the hieroglyphics, but I know they're somewhere here. Because I know that this N underlined T R and then that ion and what looks like a 3, I know that is the great God. So again, we have that NTR, which is God, and then that ion, what looks like R3, which is great. And I know that that corresponds to this part here. So again, we have that what looks like sort of a flag, and that is the NTR. And then we have that great hieroglyphic here. And then this is that NB, Lord. So again, it's kind of hard to see because it's small, and the chunked up lines also cut it off a little bit. And so I know that NB is this Lord, and then this B, what again looks like R3, elliptical H. I'm almost 100% certain that that corresponds to these set of hieroglyphics here. And I'm pretty certain that that is this, particularly this B, what looks like R3 elliptical H, is that Bach. And then we have the NB again, which is that Lord again. So again, we see that NB here, so it's not as easy to see, but it's there. And then an implied of, which matches this of here. And then we have the last part of the hieroglyphic phrase is city of Nefer. And I'm not, I think the city is implied, but I'm not 100% sure, because this Nefer, I'm pretty sure it's this chunk here, so MR-NFRT, which is in this region. So again, this is one that I'm pretty certain that at least some of the ways that I chunked it up are not fully correct, but there's parts of the inscription that I'm much more confident on, and then other parts that I know are probably wrong. Because like I said, I'm still learning myself. So the next object is a royal object. So it's a woven tapestry of Amenhotep II. And so again, this is the hieroglyphic inscription, and then this is the English translation. So again, we have that NTR Nefer, so that phrase, the good God. So if you look at the object, this is the first register, here, so to speak. So we have that NT or N underlined TR, so that God, and then that Nefer, good. And then we have the next part of the phrase, which is NB, and then this here. So Lord, which matches that NB. And I think that this word here matches crowns because this last hieroglyphic chunk is his personal name. So it's the Ak-Aparu. So if we go to the object, we have that NB Lord. So I think this is the crowns part. And then this is that Ak-Aparu in the royal cartouche here. So the next object that we're going to go over is a limestone tablet of Amenhotep II as well, so another royal object. So it starts with his name, so this J, I'm just going to scroll down a little bit. So this JMN dash dotted HTP. So this matches the Amenhotep part. So if you look at the object, this is the Amenhotep part here. So this is the personal name part. And then this N underlined TR. So again, that God. And so it's this flag. So unimply the God. And then we have this dotted H dotted K. What looks like R3 again, and the hieroglyphic sign or hieroglyphic transcription that matches is Alf, and the animal that most Egyptologists think that it originally represented was the vulture. And so that is this hieroglyphic image here, which means ruler. And then this final word, Weset, so W, Alf. So again, what looks like our number 3. ST means thieves, and that matches that hieroglyphic here. The next object is also a royal object, and it is a foundation plaque that has the name of Tutmosis IV on it. So because it's a royal inscription, you will see that good God element as well as sort of part of the standard royal name. So that NTR Nefer. So this is the actual object. So if you look at the animals that are on this object, you'll see they're all facing to the right. And so that tells you, okay, this is the register that you read first, which is why I labeled it register A. And then this is the register that you read second, hence I've labeled it register B. So you start up here, and so again, we have the N underlined TR, so the God part, and then the Nefer, so the good, perfect part. And now we're just going to go back up to the actual inscription, because the next thing that we have is an element of the royal name. So this MN elliptical HPRW dash Ray is this Men Kep Ur Ray. So again, it's in this royal cartouche here. And so now we have the next chunk, so MRY, which means beloved. So we're going to go down. Actually, we'll go down there in just a minute. Unimplied of here, and then this J M N ray. So that is a moon. So together, this is beloved of a moon. And so that matches this part here. So in this case, this is that MRY, so beloved. And then we go back up here with an implied of, and then a moon is here. And so then the next part of the inscription is this NSW, so, or NSWN underlined TRW, which matches this phrase, the king of the gods. So NSW is king, and then that N underlined TRW is gods. And so that matches this, or these hieroglyphics here. So this is the king, an implied of, and then that NTR, so that flag, gods. So now we're going to move on to the second register here. And that register matches the beginning of basically, or matches the second sentence here. So His Majesty's palace belonging to him as a child of Anubis. So we're going to start with this PR.HM.F, which is, or matches His Majesty's palace. So the PR is palace, that dotted HM is again majesty, that dotted, or that F is the pronoun, that's his. So now we go to the actual hieroglyphic object down here. And so that PR is that palace, and then that HM is majesties, and then we see that F. So if you look really close, you can again just see the horns that are just kind of barely sticking out. And that tells you that, okay, this is an F horned serpent, not regular snake, which would be underlined D. So His Majesty's palace. And then we have the last hieroglyphic part of the inscription, which is starting here and then ends here. So this TJSWM is where I'm not fully sure in terms of which parts match the English translation here. So I'm pretty sure that TJSW is belonging to him, but I'm not 100% sure about that. And I'm pretty sure that it's these set of hieroglyphics here. Because then this M has to be as, and I know that it's this here M owl. And so then the last two words are this either underlined H or elliptical HRDJNPW. And this matches this phrase, child of Anubis. So there's the implied of here. And again, I'm not 100% sure, which one is child and which one is Anubis. But if you look at the hieroglyphs, this is JNPW. So I think this is Anubis, because then this is basically the universal or the hieroglyphic sign for child or young person in Egyptian, because it's someone that is sucking their thumb, and that's the signifier that means this is a young person, and you'll see that signifier in Egyptian art overall. So those are the ends of the lesson that I have put together thus far. Again, the links to my GoFundMe campaign, my tutoring Facebook page, and the site that I took these hieroglyphic examples from are all in the description for this video. I am also, like I said, hosting a class on women in ancient Egypt through Facebook starting in January. So there'll be 5 sessions in all. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I hope that this that people who watch this learned something new. Bye.